Hello my friends and welcome back to another video. My name is Ian with Out of This World Reader. I hope you're all having a splendid day, but today is going to be my March wrap-up. It is coming here pretty late because I've been trying to catch up on just all my videos and getting all the things that I kind of read in March and putting it all together into a video. But in the month of March I ended up reading 10 books, and some of those are pretty thick books. When I am stressed out, I tend to read a lot. So there's a lot to go over in this video, and I think without further ado, let's hop in with all the books that I finished in the month of March. First off, I want to start with all the audiobooks that I finished. I think I ended up reading 5 or 6, so mostly audiobooks. I've been just going outside a lot more, getting fresh air, trying to clear my mind, and when I go outside I listen to a lot of audiobooks, going to and from school. But the first one I picked up was Life of Pi by Jan Martel. I believe this is considered like a modern classic, and a lot of people have watched the movie like me, but I have never read the book. I know my younger sister read it and she felt it was very dry. And I can agree with that. I felt at a lot of times I was listening to a textbook. It covers a lot of different topics like religion, zoology, ecology, and just Pi's life. But I felt like the story and the storytelling elements of this was really well done, but at a lot of times I felt like I was listening to a textbook more than kind of listening to the story, and I was hoping that it could focus more on kind of just those elements that I really enjoyed with it. I ended up giving this 3 stars, and that was mostly because of those elements, but overall, like, I did enjoy this, and I consider why this is considered a modern classic, but I feel like it wasn't just as much as I was hoping it to be. It was still great, but I was just hoping it to be just a little step up. And now I really want to kind of check out the movie adaptation again and see how it kind of compares. But I felt like in the movie adaptation it really captured kind of like those visual elements, and then listening to that, like, it almost felt like it was done better in the movie adaptation, if I remember correctly. That's why I really need to kind of rewatch it and see how it kind of compares. But I felt like the way that the movie kind of captured those elements was really well done. And I felt like, if my memory is correct, like, it stayed pretty true to the book, except for a couple things that had to be cut out for kind of like a younger audience. But that being said, I'm really glad that I finally picked this up and gave it a try. Next up, we have an Audible kind of original, which is called Impact Winter, which I ended up giving 4 stars. This is kind of like an urban fantasy where our world has kind of gone into like another kind of ice age, but there's this comet that kind of comes and causes the earth to kind of freeze over, and when it does, some vampires come out. I've always kind of enjoyed vampires, and this almost felt like kind of like an urban or modern fantasy setting of Empire the Vampire, and I really enjoyed Empire the Vampire. And then this kind of Audible original, we follow a full cast of characters who are kind of trying to survive in this remote kind of English town against the vampires, but they are put into different positions and they're trying to survive and live to see the next day. I feel like the sound effects and the full cast that it kind of encompassed really provided an atmosphere that really felt like I was there and that I enjoyed throughout the whole kind of experience. But I really enjoyed kind of how it went. It has 20-minute different episodes, and I can't remember how many different episodes there are, but I really liked how it kind of progressed and kind of gave you more, and you learned more about how they kind of, this ice age kind of happened, and how everything kind of unfolded and where they are today. But towards the end I felt like it was missing a little bit. But that being said, I'm hoping that they continue on with it, like they left it open for more, and I have a feeling that they will. But just because it was kind of, I felt like it was missing much, I ended up having to give it 4 stars. And sadly, that was the last kind of audiobook that I really enjoyed. I feel like after this, the other 3 audiobooks that I picked up ended up getting like 2.5 stars or 3 stars. So it was just rough after Impact and Winter. It like just went downhill from there. But the next book that I listened to was The Girl on the Train by Paula Hawkins. This actually has a movie adaptation. I feel like this is really popular, but I honestly, this might be a little controversial, but I don't understand the hype with this. I really didn't enjoy it at all. But this follows Rachel, who rides on this train every day, and she kind of spies on these neighbors that she used to kind of live nearby, and she just kind of watches their life and kind of paints these kind of movies in her mind of what they kind of live and how they interact with each other. And each day she kind of goes to work, she kind of just creates a new movie in her mind, until one day something else kind of changes when she watches them, and from there she decides she's going to try and figure out what happened and how she's going to kind of piece everything together. It felt like, to me, it felt pretty boring after kind of like the events that kind of kicked it off and got it going. It felt like after that there wasn't very much high stakes. It was mostly, it almost felt like a cozy mystery, I guess, but like there wasn't anything that I was kind of enjoying about it that I would normally in kind of like a cozy mystery. Really early on, I was able to kind of predict everything that kind of unfolded, and I haven't seen any spoilers or watched the movie, and I don't know if I will watch the movie, but it almost felt like she kept making the same mistakes over and over, and I do understand that kind of the issues that she was kind of having to deal with in her life and just the stress that she was kind of under could have influenced that, but it felt like it just kept repeating what was happening and what was occurring, and I didn't enjoy that, just the rerun of everything that was going on. Like, really, that's what made me feel like it was just kind of boring and there was no high stakes anymore. So I don't know if anybody else kind of really enjoyed this. I haven't looked at any other kind of reviews of people who kind of pick this up and whether they enjoyed this or not, but I've heard that the movie was really popular. I don't know. But overall, like, I didn't think it was too bad, but I ended up having to give this 2.5 stars. Just at the time of finishing that, I ended up getting a notification from my library saying that I had got my copy of Reckless Girls by Rachel Hawkins. So I thought, why not? Let's just give this another try. I don't know if these two are related or not. I don't know. I just noticed that when I looked at these their kind of last names. This was a new release that kind of caught my eye, and I was very interested to kind of pick up and see whether I kind of enjoyed it or not. But it follows these one couple that are kind of, they're stuck in Hawaii and they really want to kind of travel, or rather Lux kind of wants to travel the world, and her boyfriend Nico kind of is starting to kind of take roots up in Hawaii, and her dreams of kind of seeing the world are kind of going out the window. And she decides that, or they both decide that, in order to kind of kick off that love and kind of travel and kind of take the right step towards kind of doing what they dreamed of, is to take up a job of taking these two girls to Monroe Island that kind of has a history of cannibalism. And then from there, once they get there, they have some other visitors that kind of come, and then things start to go wrong on this island, and that's as much as I'll say without spoiling things. I really enjoyed the setup and them kind of going to this kind of deserted island and having a history and kind of exploring that history a little bit. But the way that it kind of progressed, I really enjoyed until the ending. I felt like the ending was really over the top, and it was like, come on now, like, really? That, I don't know. But I felt like this was honestly pretty forgettable, and I honestly don't remember much other than that kind of initial setup, what I liked, and then it kind of how it kind of progressed and then kind of took a turn. And just after that, like, I felt like it just kind of went downhill from there. And that's what really disappointed me about this, but because of all those other reasons, I had to give this 3 stars. And the last audiobook that I picked up might be another controversial one, because I mean, every kind of vacation home that you go to or anything like that, this is honestly on everybody's bookshelves. It is a favorite among many, and I decided, why not? Like, I had picked it up at my used bookstore a while ago. I thought, why not? Let's just give it a try. And that was Angels and Demons by Dan Brown. Now, before I get into this, I can see why a lot of people like this, but honestly, I felt like it was too fast-paced to my enjoyment. I really want to kind of connect with the characters and learn more about them. But the way that this starts, like, Robert Langdon kind of gets a phone call in the middle of the night, and then from there, he has like 24 hours to kind of save Vatican City from like an antimatter bomb. So it's really fast paced, and you don't get any breaks to kind of connect with the characters at all. Like, it is just one situation to the next, to the next, to the next, all trying to kind of save the day. So that's what I really kind of disliked about this. It was just too fast paced for me, and I really wanted to learn more about the characters. And honestly, like, there's a bunch of tropes that I just have read a lot of, and I just really didn't enjoy how they kind of were done in this. I don't know when this kind of was released and whether that kind of influenced a lot of mystery thrillers to come after that, but it was just like over the top at times, and there was some parts that I was kind of like cringing at. But this isn't just kind of like a rant review, because I really just enjoyed kind of the elements of the Illuminati and all that, and kind of digging up a little bit of history and kind of putting it into a tale. And then the way that it kind of went was really good. I just really went, it kind of used a little bit more kind of time and kind of spread it out a little bit. And I've watched the movie, so I kind of knew everything, so that might have kind of ruined the experience a bunch for me, because I kind of knew what was going on from the beginning. But still, like, it was enjoyable. I just didn't enjoy it as much as I was hoping to, and for that reason I'm giving it 2.5 stars. But I will be continuing on with Da Vinci Code. I have seen the movie, but I don't know, maybe they'll be a little bit different. This one was pretty accurate as well, I felt like. But this was the final audiobook that I listened to this month. The first kind of physical book that I picked up and finished this month was a most anticipated release for me. And I'm happy to say that I did enjoy it. I ended up giving it 4 stars, and that was Dead Silence by S.A. Barnes. Now, before I get into this, I really want to say that I am honestly a scaredy cat, and I'm afraid of everything. Anytime like I go watch like a horror movie with my sister, anytime like it was dark out, my eyes were staring at my feet, and I didn't look back up until there was some light. So know that before I go into this, but I honestly felt that this was pretty creepy, and the atmosphere that it kind of used and created throughout the novel was really well done, and it kind of spooked me out. Like, there was one scene that I kind of won't go into for spoiler's sake, but if you don't know, I have a cat named Izzy, and she likes to hide under my bed, and there's one scene in this book that kind of frightened me, and I had to get up in the middle of the night for something. I think someone knocked on my door. That already freaked me out a bunch. But then when I came back and got back in bed, guess who decided to swipe at my feet before I got into bed? Good old Izzy, and I nearly had a heart attack. So that was just like having those kind of those frights from the book, and having them kind of freak me out that much I just really enjoyed that. And this wastes like no time, like jumping right into it. Like from the start, you are thrown right into kind of the situation. There's no kind of pauses or breaks. I feel like you are just put in the situation and you're just strapping in and going for the ride. But it wasn't like fast paced, like it had a good kind of pacing that I did enjoy. But basically you're kind of following this crew, and they're on the kind of like final mission, and Claire, the captain, is kind of having to kind of being forced into retirement, and she doesn't want to do that. But when they come across like this luxury kind of cruise liner that kind of went missing a while ago, they decide that they're gonna salvage it and bring it back, and they're just gonna hit the jackpot, and they're just going to do their own thing. And Claire kind of seizes this opportunity, and then they land on this ship and discover that shit's gone down on this boat, and or not this spaceship. And from there, they're kind of seeing different things kind of move in the shadows, and it kind of gets pretty spooky from there. And that's as much as I'll tell you, because I feel like the best experience with this one is going in knowing just as little as you can. It was said to be kind of like the Titanic meets The Shining, and I haven't read The Shining, but from what I've heard from a lot of other people, they said that it was kind of very accurate. So I'm hoping to pick up The Shining and see how it kind of compared. But like I mentioned, kind of like the spooky elements and just the horror, and kind of like the little bit of gore that was kind of alright guys, I felt quite a bit of gore included throughout it. Like I felt like it just created that atmosphere that I was really hoping from it. And being kind of trapped in space, I just really enjoyed this throughout the whole thing. The only thing that I didn't like was, since it kind of jumped right into it and focused more on the plot, like it didn't flesh out the characters as much as I was hoping. Like it just focused more just kind of like the atmosphere and just kind of the horror elements. But I was kind of expecting a little bit more from the characters, and that was the only kind of thing that I didn't like about it. And I guess like the ending, I was hoping that it was going to take a different kind of route, but instead it kind of took a different kind of more realistic route. And I still enjoyed that, but I was kind of hoping for a little bit something more, you know, like a little dash on the top. But overall, I really enjoyed this, and I ended up giving it 4 stars. Dang, so this was the only 5 stars that I read this month, and it was a conclusion to the Winter Night trilogy, which was The Winter of the Witch by Catherine Arden. I really enjoyed how it kind of wrapped up everything, and the things that I was kind of hoping for more throughout the series kind of they were provided for me in this final book. I was hoping for a little bit more romance between Vasya and kind of Marzoko. I can never say his name right now. Like, I'm still in, like, dyslexia is killing me. But I felt like the way that it kind of wrapped everything up in this final book just made it kind of stand out as a series that I will kind of forever kind of enjoy and have a place on my bookshelves. And also I felt like the stakes in this final book was kind of the highest that it's been throughout the other books. And just, I feel like each book kind of gets better and just incorporates more of the kind of Russian folklore and history elements, and just it continues to add on with each book. And I just liked how, because I didn't really enjoy the first book as much as I was hoping for, but then the second book I really enjoyed, and then this one I absolutely loved. But just the writing and everything involved with it was just so enjoyable, and I'm very excited to see what else kind of Catherine Arden comes out with in the future. I believe she has some middle grade or YA, but I feel like this kind of setting, this Russian history and folklore, she really kind of stands out in. But if you haven't heard of this follows Vasya as a young girl in the first book who lives in kind of like this remote Russian village, and her whole life she's kind of been surrounded by these old kind of pagan gods. I can't remember what their names are, but they have like a specific name, and she's just kind of like one of the only people to be able to see them. And they start to disappear when her father brings home his new wife, because her mom actually passed away, and she brings with her Christianity. Kind of makes these old gods. They're not gods as necessarily. I don't know what they're called, but they start to disappear, and she has to kind of make a deal with the snow demon Marzoko to kind of bring them back, because as they're disappearing, something else is kind of coming in the background. I just butchered like that whole thing, so please look up like the synopsis somewhere else. But definitely give this a try if you haven't. The next book that I finished was actually another most anticipated release for me this year, and it was kind of a bit of a disappointment for me, and that was The Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea by Axie O. This is a retelling of a Korean folktale, and I love folktales, everything about them. They're kind of my specialty in my degree. But just reading something that I've kind of never experienced before was really enjoyable, and that's something that I really enjoyed about this. I really enjoyed kind of the setting and being under the sea, because if you know me, I love the ocean, and having this kind of city and the whimsical elements of this city under the sea was just really well done, and I felt like her writing really kind of encompassed all of that about it. But I felt like for some reason there was something that was missing for me in this book. Like, I just enjoyed like the setup of how Mina kind of got there, and how she's having to kind of save the rest of her people, and just all like there's just a lot that I enjoyed about this, but I felt like it was just missing something. I can't name what it is, but for that like reason I ended up giving 3 stars. Like, there was a couple parts where I was like, why, like, this is tough, like I don't know if I can finish this, and I considered D'ing and F'ing it, because like there was just something missing that I can't like think of off the top of my head. But I ended up kind of pushing through, and at the end I ended up giving it 3 stars. I would still recommend this and give it a try. In here, Mina's people believe that the kind of sea god is angry with them, and because of that these storms kind of ravage their lands and kind of destroy everything, and they feel like the only way to kind of stop these storms from happening is to sacrifice a girl every year until the sea god kind of marries and finds his bride, finds his true love, and stops the storm. So they just continue to throw girls into the sea and hope that everything kind of gets better. And Mina's brother, who is deeply in love with this one young girl, is the next sacrifice. So Mina decides that she's going to take her place, and she sacrifices herself, and from there she arrives in the sea god's kind of realm, and she has to kind of figure it out with the help of some other kind of characters and perspectives in this realm to figure out what's going on and to stop the storms forever. So this is a standalone, and other than those other things, like, I really enjoyed it, but I just felt like I was missing something, and that was the reason that it ended up getting the rating that it did. This next book was a big old chunker, and it was so close to hitting 5 stars that honestly, like, it probably is 5 stars, but it felt like it was just a bit much, or had a bit too much in it at times, and that was Leviathan Wakes by James S. Corey, which is the first book in the Expanse series. This was kind of said to be the best kind of entryway into kind of adult sci-fi, and it's kind of like a space opera following 2 different perspectives, and I really enjoyed this. It follows 2 different perspectives. Miller, who is a kind of detective on one of the belt kind of stations in this rock, but he is basically given the job to kind of find this one girl and bring her back to her family. And as he starts to learn more about her, he becomes so obsessed with her that he is just kind of doing everything he can to figure out what happened to her, where she is, and how he kind of can finish the job. But then there is another perspective, kind of Holden, who comes across, I believe he's like the second in command in the beginning of this book, but he comes across this derelict ship called the Scorpuli, and it has a secret on board that can kind of cause a lot of problems. And after that, kind of like some things happen, and the whole kind of system between the Martians and the Belt are kind of on the verge of war. And basically Holden and Miller's perspectives kind of slowly start to piece together until they kind of get together, and then they try and stop an interplanetary war. So it really kind of kicked up the stakes as you kind of continue on. And that was really one thing that I enjoyed about this, is that as you kind of moved from chapter to chapter, like the stakes and everything, world building, all that kind of stuff kind of continued to add on and give me more that I was kind of wanting. There wasn't much that I kind of disliked about this other than it is very long, and I felt like some parts could have been cut out, but I'm very excited to see where it continues on with the second book. I'm planning on finishing this 9-book series this year, which is very ambitious, but I'm hoping to pick up Caliban's War here pretty soon, and I definitely recommend this if you haven't given it a try. So I guess it was on just like a little bit of a sci-fi kick after finishing Leviathan Wakes, and I decided to pick up Starsight, which is the sequel to Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. This ended up giving 3.5 stars, and the only reason that I felt like it got this is because it almost felt like a repeat of the first book, but just in a different setting. And I did enjoy that, like that new setting and kind of learning more and getting questions answered. But I felt like it was just like another repeat of the first book, and that was something that I saw a lot of other reviewers kind of say. But like I did enjoy kind of like the introductions of new characters and just seeing more of the world building kind of expand, as well as kind of just learning more about Spencer and kind of seeing how she's starting to grow as a character. Like in the first book, she grew towards the end of the book, and then in this book she is continuing to grow. So I'm very excited and eager to see where she'll go in Cytonic and how it'll all wrap up in the final book, which I believe is called Defiant. But I'm hoping to pick up like the novellas here pretty soon and get more into this world, because I just love this skyward kind of world and everything about it. And one of the things I did dislike was how quickly it kind of progressed and sent Spencer to kind of Starsight. Because in the beginning, kind of it introduced kind of like a new character that I really wanted to learn more about, and she is actually gets her own novella that I'm really hoping to pick up soon. So I'm very excited to pick that up very soon. But if you haven't read this, this follows Spencer, who lives on this kind of world where humanity has kind of been just secluded to after they're kind of chased by the Krell and forced them to kind of live underground and fight for their survival on this planet. So there's a lot of high stakes in the first book, and their society kind of relies on these pilots who kind of go up into the atmosphere and protect the underground cities from the Krell. They have like these bombers that can just completely wipe out life. And Spencer's father was actually one of the most famous authors, but in one of the battles that kind of changed the kind of tide in the war with the Krell, he supposedly fled, and her family is kind of thrown into the shadows, and she has to claw her way back up the ranks and get into this pilot school and fight to kind of earn her name and earn her respect back. and then it kind of goes about from there. So I would really recommend the first book, and then just check out the Starsight and see how you feel. Because of the reasons that it was kind of like a repeat, I still enjoyed everything else, but it had to get 3.5 stars. And the final book that I picked up this month was one that I was a bit worried to pick up because a lot of people hated it. But that book was the final book in the Poppy War trilogy, which was The Burning God by R.F. Kuang. I ended up giving this 4 stars, and honestly, like, I can understand why a lot of people didn't like this and how it ended, but I really enjoyed everything up until about like the final 70 pages or so. But it was understandable as the way that kind of R.F. Kuang kind of took, because if you think about it, like, this is kind of a little bit of mild spoilers. Rin has had a very traumatic past with kind of her leaders and the patriarchy and everything else before these events, like the ending. So I can understand how, like, it wasn't just going to be fixed overnight when everything kind of was resolved. Like, she isn't just going to be completely fine the next morning, everything's kind of over. So, like, it is understandable the way and the route that R.F. Kuang took with this ending. So I feel like she deserves praise for taking this different route, because a lot of times there aren't happy endings, and there's definitely no winners in war, and she really portrayed that in this final book. But other than that, like, I liked kind of the journey that they went on and how they were kind of going towards everything and getting there. But then it was just tough for me because I was kind of hoping that it would give a happy ending, but it took the route that was kind of understandable for everything. I felt like I just repeated everything I just said, but I feel like in this book, like, Rin was the darkest she's ever been, and like, I feel like each book she starts to become more of like a kind of like a morally gray character. Like, I feel like in the first book she was a little bit of a morally gray character, and then in the second book she just kicked up another notch, and in this final book she was kind of the most that she's been out of it, and it was just hard to kind of see how her past has kind of affected her, and just seeing how she is having to kind of deal with everything that's going on. I feel like this included a lot of other topics and the consequences of war. Like, it touched on a lot, and you can definitely see how R.F. Kuang's kind of background in history and Chinese history kind of played into this, and you can definitely see how she just dedicated a lot of time to focusing on just the consequences of war and showing that there's no winners in it. So I just enjoyed that as well, because that is very realistic. So other than that, kind of like those last 70 pages, I really enjoyed this whole book. But because the ending did go the way that I was hoping that it wasn't, ended up giving 4 stars. But this will still be a series that will always be a favorite of mine. So those are all the books that I picked up this month. Let me know if you read any of these other books and what you thought of The Burning God. I want to hear kind of like your thoughts on that. But that is going to be all for today's video. If you did enjoy, please consider liking, subscribing so you never miss out on another adventure. But it is time for Ellie to come on here and first wish you all to have a splendid day. But she also says that adventure is out there. So I'll catch you next time. Bye.